Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. I was, for whatever reason, the update on my audio setup when I do the show from where I have to do it so that Philip Bittner can join us on my other computer, the update required was crash-worthy. So I'm rolling in hot right now. Super exciting. And I have a cat crawling around my feet who desperately wants to know why he's not getting attention this morning because I was in wire pulling mode. That's always fun. That said,
Cables,
so much.
Let me help.
Yes, right. I can get dangerously close to those things and chew on them. So lots to talk about. Obviously, this week has been a whiplash of SCOTUS rulings and responses. You guys know my lecture at this point. These things were set in stone in 2016, folks. And if you are upset about them and you did anything but vote to secure the, Hillary Clinton's win back then, or to guarantee that we have control of the House, and not just that we, in your district, you kind of voted in the primary and then blew off the general or not quite thing, or I'm a little mad because my congressperson leans a little more Manchin and Sinema than I would like them to, but the only other option is an anti-abortion lunatic who wants prayers mandatory in school. If that kept you from voting during a midterm, or slowed your roll about it, or even allowed you to kind of talk in conversation in what you thought was sort of an honest way, an honest criticism about your own party, but actually just played into the hands of people to cry like, yeah, Obama wasn't that popular in the first place. Look at the numbers on ACA. It wasn't popular. 52% of people hated it. Now, a third of those people wanted it to go further, and that's why they didn't like it. And a bunch of those people, a few more of those people, about 8%, wanted a single payer element in it like I did, but that didn't mean I didn't like the program. Right. So in essence, anybody who is floating the idea that, well, what I'm doing is just speaking honestly about the, I like my party warts and all, I like my country warts and all, understand that that is not the way the vast majority of the conversation that you're reading is being, or expressing is being read in the world. And it's also, when it is weaponized, and it's weaponized that not only do you not, it's not that you don't approve of the Manchin and Sinemas of the world. It's not that you don't think they go, that we need more, left-leaning or left of center people to really push back against this. We need a broader coalition, yada, yada. It's not that they don't think you believe that. It's that they know that all it takes is your ire about Manchin and Sinema, for example, to make you forget that the entirety of the Republican Party is not only against what you believe, even in their base level, even in their normal establishment Republican style, but if you caught any of the Wyoming congressional debate where Liz Cheney is defending her seat against 4 Republicans, 2 of which are absolute Trump won the election, it was rigged fighters.
It's like an episode of Scooby-Doo.
It's embarrassing. But the idea that you would somehow, because I think it's important to have a balanced conversation about what you want and the problems that your group has, okay? But it has to be done on a scale of reality. Because, if you're Nazifying people that just disagree with you on tactics in your own side who have the same goals as you, but differ on how it can happen, and when it happens and how it happens will determine whether or not it can be swiftly overturned, for example, by a future court. And those kind of discrepancies, those kind of decisions, those kind of ideas of like, we got to protect the filibuster because if we do this, and the president came out this week saying he believes in a carve out for this and for voting rights, basically out of frustration and awareness that the Republican Party have gone off the deep end in many ways, in line, I would say, with his feelings about the Hyde Amendment, which originally was put there to help bring along, pro-life Republicans who also are pro-choice on board to not fight Roe v. Wade every turn or try to make that, anybody they put up a bullet train to getting rid of those rights. That is now gone. They are not fair players in this situation, and therefore the Hyde Amendment has outlived its usefulness. It functioned, it worked, it was helpful, but it stopped being helpful once the other side started playing fair. Line it up with what you would consider the Minsk Agreement in Russia between Ukraine and Russia, or the NATO founding agreement that Russia signed with them, which they apparently, played nice on for about a decade and then just went, we were just kidding. That was never a real thing. So,
No.
I guess my biggest thing going into the fall is that you can talk about the frustration you have with members of your own party that are not even in your state, but you have to do it with a level of balance and discernment and intellect and logic that is based in reality. Because most of, statistically,
it's a high bar, Hal.
I know, but most of the people that are listening to the sound of my voice right now don't live in Arizona or West Virginia. And so their frustrations with the Mansions and Cinemas of the world, for example, have no bearing on the culpability or the circumstance that Democrats in the rest of the country find themselves in. Because again, we are currently the minority party in the Senate. Now, there's an absolute discrepancy in the balance of power in the Senate. It is absurd beyond measure that Oklahoma, which is, by the way, as landmass, 41% Indian territory, in case you were following the other weird SCOTUS rulings this week, still has 2 senators and fewer people than a Chicago suburb. So we're already ice skating uphill against this issue. And so the idea that even Manchin and Sinema are our problem is, I'm sorry to tell everyone, an absurdity. It's a waste of your anxiety. It is not, there is no purpose to wailing and gnashing of teeth around Manchin and Sinema unless you're an Arizona Democrat and you're actively campaigning against them, or you have somebody there, or you're a West Virginia, or like you're in West Virginia or Arizona as a citizen. Everywhere else, you got no complaints about the Democratic Party in your state. You don't, not in any practical sense. You honestly don't. Your Congress people are busting their hump in a 220 to 210 split in the House. Even that, a hair's breadth. This is not an example of where the Democratic Party has convinced the majority of Americans, even though the polling shows that they favor these kind of things, that we are the trustworthy group to shepherd these things through, and therefore should be given control of the government in these areas. You can say that it's all been, Republicans bashing Democrats over this time, but I would argue that never diminishes the vote of the person in the party. No Democrat is ever going to not vote for a Democrat because Republicans called them names. Ever. What's going to stop them is the demoralized feeling that nothing will change and they're not going to do it and blah, blah, blah. Even as their Democratic congressperson would be facing a Republican in the election coming up, and that the cliff that Republican wants to take the country off of is an absurdity. It's beyond your, it's nightmare level as far as women's rights, gay rights, social programs. I mean, genuinely. The Republican Party, as part of their platform committee, has presented an idea that all social programs should be sunsetted every 5 years unless they can survive another vote. So, and they do it in the 5-year cycle is important because it can be in off-year elections, even around senatorial campaigns, when they know the turnout is low. Now, would the turnout the next time be very high to get people in? Yeah, but you would ping pong 6 years of people, and God knows how long it would take to jumpstart Social Security again, or Medicare and Medicaid again, or S-chip, or the Department of Education and public schools nationwide. Like, the time it would take to jumpstart those things once they were cadavered by this group means 8 years without Social Security, with the people caught in that system, in that time. And if you're saying you're willing to sacrifice those people because you think politically the world needs to know how awful your options are, then then that cruelty is on the same level of the Republican cruelty we have seen this week towards, from both the majority in the SCOTUS, the Republicans that back them, and the words of Clarence Thomas telling you what is next. I don't have a problem with people decrying decisions by Democrats or whatever, but you have to put it in context of being a tactical decision, because the platform is the platform, and we all agree where we're wanting to go eventually. The Republicans are, now material enemies of any of that progress. As a party, not like some of them, maybe as a wing, that's the platform. And yesterday, and we got to take a break, but yesterday I did a piece of the Wyoming debate between Liz Cheney and the 4 other people running. And the primary talking point of 3 of those 4 people right out of the gate was, we're not a democracy, we're a republic. That one person, one vote doesn't matter. And the assurance of you don't think that thought, which is emboldened right now, isn't going to have the freedom to just let its freak off the leash in future judgeships and stuff. It's insanity to even talk about a parallel. I'm sorry, but I'm done with talking about Sinema and Manchin as if they're the enemies of the universe. They're not. They don't even scale next to these people.
No, they're just lame.
They're just lame. And it's not something I have control over. What I do have control over is the messaging around, what's going on to some degree, how I will talk about the rest of the Democrats that are busting their butts to try and make something out of this, in spite of the fact that they have to deal with an Arizona Democrat and a West Virginia Democrat, which is different than an AOC Democrat, no matter what you do. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, MAGA Worldwide. Miranda rights, tribal sovereignty, women's rights, gay rights, the right to not be fired because you're gay. They're all either on the chopping block or the chicken is running around with its head cut off because I'm an Hillary butter emails. We'll be back. Welcome back. Here I am running around like crazy. This is, this was a whiplash week on a lot of fronts. The Cassidy Hutchinson story, of course, kicking off this kind of response from both Trump and the right about she's lying. She made up the story. The 2 agents who were in the car now say that was a lie and that no such thing ever happened. We, of course, find out shortly thereafter that actually most of the reporters who were sniffing around the Trump White House post January 6th had heard the story themselves, just didn't report on it because they didn't think it was germane or it was too outlandish or it lined up with some sort of like their boss thought it would be sort of biased to go into that. And since it was just the word of these other guys, now that it's confirmed under oath by at least one person who it was related to, they're going back and talking to their sources, and their Secret Service sources.
People had heard about this, but it was so nuts and so
they're like,
it's just so nuts.
Can we put this behind us?
Right. Lisa really tries to avoid a lot of news coverage for.
I think that's wise. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I told her about the hearings and what was said, and she was both astounded and unsurprised.
Right. Well, we now have both CNN and Rolling Stone confirming from their sources that their reporters had heard these stories multiple times over the last year before Cassidy Hutchinson brought them up. They were never a part of a greater story until this point because, for obvious reasons, it was just a sort of anecdotal Trump dirt and people were kind of over it. And it didn't apply, it was such a narrow cast story. But once she said it under oath that she was told this, and the guys and Trump pushed back on it and really narrowly threaded that stuff. Like he was like, they're saying I leapt from the car, like the story he made up basically he's creating this giant, he tried to strangle a straw man. He basically set up this hyperbolic straw man about what she said and then went to tear it down. It's an absurdity. It was silly. We did on my live stream at infotainmentwars.com, which is my YouTube channel. That'll take you right there if you want to subscribe. I went through the whole Trump interview he did on Newsmax about this. And it's very telling. We have a couple of rules, Sparksisms around, being media savvy, especially. One of them is anytime you see an incendiary headline, make sure you check the third, or in the case of USA Today and shorter paragraphed periodicals, the third, fifth, or seventh paragraph, because that'll be the yeah, but. That'll be the part where I know we said at the top of the article that, an asteroid is heading towards the Earth. But by towards, we mean if our galaxy continued on its trajectory from 1 billion years ago, but it wobbles, and therefore the wobble has taken us out of the trajectory, like that kind of thing. That shows up in paragraph 3, well after you've clicked and the ad started rolling. So this is, there are just areas where you get the yeah buts. One of the dead giveaways on a politician, when they get caught doing something, when the accusations against them are true, watch for the word outrageous. Because if they throw the word, this is outrageous. These accusations are outrageous. Because that's true, whether they're true or false.
Right. They're not lying.
No, you're not calling the person a liar. You're just saying that sounds crazy. That's outrageous.
We agree.
Yes. Is it true or not is the thing. Well, that's why they avoid that part of it. And so Trump does a lot of that. And the other one is this hyperbolic straw man. You're not really you're creating an analogous story sideline to it. You're exaggerating what they said and then denying the exaggeration. And in the case of what she said was she argued with them. She said that they had told her, these two agents, his deputy chief of staff, who was on his Secret Service detail, and Bobby Engels, who was on the Secret Service detail, who was apparently shook up while they were relating this story to her because it had just happened, said that Trump said, take me to the Capitol. He said, we're not taking you to the Capitol. He said, take me. I'm the effing president. You have to take me to the Capitol. And then he lurched for the steering wheel and then the clavicle of one of the agents. Now, what Trump's telling of it is that they're alleging that he leapt, from the car and started choking people. It's like he blows it up to an absurdity and then denies the absurdity. But the reality is that they're also doing this thing that he attacked physically. He was going to choke a Secret Service person. Now, nobody believes that. I mean, maybe he snapped. That's possible because he was losing it and he still is. But I think more than likely people thought he was one of these dudes who thought he could grab you by your shirt collar and go, listen, I'm the president. Hey, I'll tell you what's, listen here, see, I'm your boss. Now you get with the program, Charlie. The bad things are going to happen to you. That it was more of a grabbing of the collar kind of thing as opposed to a choking motion. But it helps that they weren't forthcoming in the details. And when she relayed it, she just told what they told.
The details.
Right. She just told what limited details they had given her. So that craziness, set off 24 hours of she's a liar. And because these two guys are saying that never happened, they're, by the way, not saying they never told her it happened, which is crucial to her testimony being trustworthy. They are not denying that they told her this. They are denying that it happened now, which is a totally different animal. Again, outrageous. It was outrageous. That's outrageous that I would reach over and try to choke a Secret Service person. It's outrageous. Meanwhile, even Mark Meadows in stories contemporaneous to the time was saying that the president wanted to go to the Capitol and there was the security, Secret Service did not allow him to, did not want him to. Those stories were happening at the time.
What if he got in the Capitol? I
Oh,
mean, come on.
all right. I mean, the idea was, I guess, that he charges in. These people are all with me and attack. Like
Yeah,
madness.
like
I
I
mean,
don't see that turning out well.
no. Well, obviously not. I mean, let's understand that he wanted to go. He wanted to take down the magnetometers. That's what she said. That which is let the people in because the guns aren't for me. They're not going to shoot me. He denied that too. He goes, I don't want guns at my rally. They went ahead to the Capitol anyways. And they're like the way he twists the story you can tell he's been dodging the technicalities in life. Oh, thank you, Carol, for the super chat on our YouTube channel. Appreciate that. Um, Hillary Clinton was easy. They had assassinated her character for 30 years. It's much harder to lie on the fly. Hence Biden, the doddering criminal mastermind who doesn't know where he is. Yeah, that's their problem has always been that they want to have their cake and lose it too. And the idea that, Biden, we got to take a break, but that Biden can't tie his shoes, but he's also running an international criminal enterprise.
Exactly.
He's the Inspector Clouseau of Dr. Evils. It makes no sense. And that's why it failed. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. I want to talk about the other SCOTUS rulings that went through this week. Oh, the wailing and gnashing of teeth about the Supreme Court that I and people like me were doing in 2015 and 2016, that all of a sudden, because people are waking up to the boiling water that they are in, and the rest of us have been screaming at frogs to get out of the pot, to do something about it for all this time. And they're like, we've got to do something. We've got to change the filibuster. We have to expand the court. Like you only are asking for these radical solutions because you let go of the reins of the normal solutions you had for years.
Yeah.
You don't have to have radical solutions like we're asking for right now. That may be the only way to fix this if you treated everything else with responsibility for the last decade and a half. Because this is the result of not just people, blowing off 2016. It's not because a lot of people are trying to lay it at the feet of Hillary Clinton, and that she was unpopular and they had to run her. And the reality is that there's the midterms along the way during the Obama years when Democrats gave control to Republicans or they lessened their numbers, or even in 2020 where Biden won an enormous lead, but House members lost in some of these crucial states and brought us down in number, that the focus on, or the purity test around your congressional candidate versus your senator versus the president has caused particular damage in the House, has created an extra challenge in the Senate, again, because Manchin and Sinema are the news, not the entirety of the Republican Party, amongst Democratic voters. And what really gave the Republicans, like Mitch McConnell, the ability to go, you know what, I'm going to keep Merrick Garland from being seated, I'm going to hold that and give it to Gorsuch, was not so much the electorate around the presidential election even. It was the fact that every 2 years after the presidential election, Democratic voters for over a decade and a half have said, those things aren't important for me to show up. They're not important enough. Either I don't think it's that big a deal, or if it does happen, it deserves to happen to show everybody how bad things are. This, and again, I will always put this on us because I'm trying to motivate us to act. And the only thing right now diminishing Democratic votes anywhere are Democrats saying that it doesn't matter, saying that that it's Hillary Clinton's fault or Ruth Bader Ginsburg's fault. When in reality, the Republicans currently are more afraid of the Trump MAGA crowd, their physical danger from those folks, than they will ever be of the far left base of the Democratic Party. They don't fear them at all. As a matter of fact, they count on them. They count on them to cause enough rifting in the Democratic Party to drive the vote down a little bit to give them an area where they can keep purple states red. That's the plan. Mitch McConnell is not afraid of base Democratic voters. He's counting on them. People who call themselves base, anyways. I would argue that you're only the base if you show up every time. That's really the base. A lot of times that gets decried as, quote, the establishment. Well, you get to establish something the more often you show up. That's how it works in life, in every situation. Unless you're in a permanent psychological 15-year-old state where the favorite person that comes to your birthday party is the one that only comes every 8 years and only when they like the food. In China, they have a phrase, "Zhou Pengyo," means meat and liquor friend. They're around. They're always around when there's meat and liquor. So my message is to Democrats and Democratic voters and independents who lean that way, or even have the nerve in a bar to say they care about things like women's rights and minority rights and securing Social Security, for the future generations, not letting someone like Donald Trump determine the rules of engagement for the military, soften them so much, again, that there were more civilian deaths from drone strikes in the first year of the Trump administration than there were in all 8 years of the Obama administration. And the policy that Hillary Clinton was presenting was identical to the Obama policy. And they went, coin flip. And there are people that are dead because coin flip. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be unforgiving about that stuff, because all the wailing and gnashing of teeth that's happening right now should have happened years ago, when people, and should happen going forward. Because the only thing that will solve this in any permanent sense, that will guarantee these rights that have been stripped away, that will rebuild what has been torn down, is 6 years of rebuilding. I mean, nobody thinks that a hurricane comes through and the rebuilding effort is as fast as the hurricane. Ever.
Nope.
So that it's increasingly frustrating for people to act like, because they themselves are infrequent, unreliable voters, they themselves can feel they are in some sort of position to demand that the party behave in a way as if they were reliable, as if they were the consistent voter. And then apparently their mind is boggled when we get to, and by the way, this happens to Republican activist crowds as well. It's happening to the maggots right now around Donald Trump. The party is stiff-arming Trump, and there are a bunch of his activist groups that are trying to keep their claws in it as long as they can. It is the same social impact that's happening on either side of this of the party. The difference is I don't care what they're doing. That's not my party, and I don't agree with their goals. So if they tear themselves to pieces, it's popcorn time. However, I do care about the goals of the Democratic platform, and especially the minorities and marginalized people who are going to be at the receiving end of these rights being diminished more than any group. So anybody who feels like you can phone this stuff in, or that it won't take constant and never-ending improvement to get what the goals we're trying to accomplish for the betterment of, by the way, not only Democratic voters, but everybody in the country. I believe these things because I think they're good for humans, not because I believe they're good for my side. There was literally a guy in the Wyoming debate yesterday that we went through who was like, I represent the people who vote for me, not the people who didn't. In the Wyoming state legislature, he's like, I vote the way the people who sent me there vote, not the way that will help the other people. Like, again, they have this attrition, winner take all attitude because they don't know how to run an inclusive government, and they have no interest in doing it. And the idea that you would kind of like 6 of one, half dozen of another, 2 legs in the same pair of pants, uniparty story is diluted at this point. So we know about the Roe v. Wade warning was coming. Many of us, like I said, we've been talking about it for years. That just giving them a toehold on the Supreme Court was enough to put it in jeopardy. But this week, for example, there was sort of a fight between Gorsuch and Kavanaugh about Native American tribal lands rights, about overlapping jurisdictions that undermine the sovereignty of Indian land in this country anew. And when you've got somebody like Neil Gorsuch pushing back on it vociferously, by the way, apparently he's one of the, this is one of his key issues where he believes in the permanent sovereignty of Indian land in the country. And yet Neil Gorsuch, obviously the liberals dissented and he went with them on this. So it was a 5-4 ruling. Kavanaugh essentially argued in the majority opinion that essentially the idea of sovereign land that he likes beer. And Squee told him that the idea of sovereign land is kind of a myth.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, going forward. And the idea that we could the idea that you would allow the Senate or the House to be taken by the Republicans this fall. And again, before the leak of the Roe documents, before the Roe opinion, before the leak, what was the general story that you heard on the news about Democrats' chances this fall? That it was it was going to be a shellacking. Mm-hmm. We're going to lose. Now, if the same voters that showed up to vote for Joe Biden just by the numbers showed up, they don't even have to all show up. If the same majority that showed up, when Hillary ran, the 64 million in that zone showed up, that would not be the case. It's not that those voters didn't die. They didn't leave the country. They didn't all join Joel Osteen's church and have a come to mega Jesus moment. They still exist. Those folks were prepared to, apparently, let the Democrats, quote, get shellacked in the fall because who cares? Because what have you done for me lately? Because, blowing off the fact that we're no longer in Afghanistan, we have an infrastructure bill and bipartisan gun regulations for the first time in 26 and 30 years, respectively. That, Biden halved the deficit, halved unemployment during his first year and change in office. We have the first black woman on the SCOTUS. This is the most union-friendly president. All the things you're checking towards. And the only reason he hasn't gotten more is because we lost congressional seats in the House, and we have fewer. We have a hair's breadth Senate majority only given to us by 2 independents who caucus with the Democrats, but can't even run as Democrats in their states for fear they won't get reelected. And the VP doing the deciding vote. But what is the language you hear? We have control over the entire government. We have control. That's the phrase. You hear it all the time. We have control over the entire. Okay, we don't have a veto, or we don't have a filibuster beating majority in the Senate, so we don't have control there. We need the vice president's vote just to get halfway. And again, as Democrats stand, the vice president's vote brings us to 49 in the Senate, not 51. 49 Democrats, if we include the vice president. But what is the conversation been almost the entire beginning of this year? The Democrats are going to lose this fall, even for Democrats. Why? Did they disappear? Are the goals not being chipped away at? Are we not making steady progress while fixing the mess that Trump set up? No. but the same crowd that walked away from Obama and convinced Mitch McConnell that nobody will be there to have his back. That if he tries to go a step further in any of his plans, we'll be able to shut him down because his own voters won't be there in a year and a half. That's why they don't fear Democrats. That's why up until the Roe leak, and that's why they freaked out about it. Up until that came out, they were going to skate into controlling both the House and the Senate this fall. The question is, will this be enough to quote unquote inspire Democrats to show up?
Yeah. What happens when the conservative dog actually catches the car he's been chasing?
Right. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. The House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. I did a piece on my live stream yesterday where, because I do long form stuff on there. So if somebody posts a clip, I do the whole thing. I do end to end. So I'm not accused of taking stuff out of context. Most of the time, though, it gets tough sometimes because there's so many lies. Even in a 9 or 10 or 12 minute clip, that's a good 45 minutes of show, not including jokes, not including me just being silly, which I like to do. Sometimes you end up spending time just like in just debunking, multiple articles, just debunking what they're saying, even the articles they post themselves. That's the fun part. So, but one of the big mysteries that I have been dealing with is where some of these talking points come from. Where did they get this stuff? What in the hell? So I
feel like you got an answer.
Well, I've got a couple, but this week, I don't know if you're ready. I know Johnny's ready. I know I'm ready. But according to sources, Trump is going to announce that he's going to run for president on July 4th, because it's the most American thing he can do. And
so American.
Yes, obviously he's going to do this at the base of Mount Rushmore. And JFK Jr. is going to fly an airplane out of George Washington's mouth and land by his side and announce himself.
Are going to fly out of his butt. Yep.
And then Trump is going to pull off his face mask, and it's going to be Andy Kaufman. And we're going to find out that Trump is actually a moderate, like a version of a Tony Clifton character that he's been doing for
this has all been performance art
for years. You're right. If it was, I would be. You know what the relief that would go through this country? Like people would be mad, but they'd be like, "Oh, thank God, that's not real." But that source was, of course, Alex Jones and the newly revived Q account on
they're back.
8 Chacon or whatever it is. Yeah. Well, I mean, Ron Watkins' run for Congress has failed miserably, so he's gone back to typing on the internet and saying cryptic things to set off these folks. Now, will the Q thing have an impact? No, not anymore. Will Alex Jones's prediction come true about Monday? No, I seriously doubt it. And by the way, if Trump does, he can no longer take money from Save America PAC. So look for the next year his financial problems to get worse and more stories about the RNC having to pay his legal bills to come out. That's hilarious. So in and of itself, like, dude, go ahead, walk into that rake. That said, not happening. But one of the stories that he brings up and that Greg Kelly and some of these other folks bring up is about Ashley Babbitt, that she was murdered on, and that this was an illegal act and yada, yada, and she was an innocent victim. And I saw the video. You saw the video. Everybody saw the video. Everybody's seen her previous interviews, all the backstory around why she was there, what she thought she was accomplishing, who she thought she was with, all that kind of stuff. So the idea that they keep saying that is mind-boggling. And it's and to me feels like they're using the death of this deluded woman as a shield for their desires. That they're using it to vilify the people that she and they were there to attack, and that they are somehow, using the fact that she was killed as an example of how Democrats want to treat MAGA supporters. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
that's the plan for everybody. Meanwhile, castle doctrine stories and these open carry laws notwithstanding, that they seem to feel that you should be able to shoot just about anybody if you don't like how they're looking at you. But somehow Ashley Babbitt's off the, that's out of bounds. And I saw this week why and where this story comes from. Marjorie Taylor Greene had on a reporter who was a reporter for Epoch Times, who was one of the people, became an Epoch Times reporter, I would say, after the fact, was there documenting what was going on, filming all this stuff.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say they had the documents.
Yes, they kind of do, but they kind of didn't. And they didn't show his video because they thought it would be too graphic. So they showed other video that doesn't show what they say it shows. I mean, it was the goofiest thing. People watched it yesterday with me on my live stream. We were all just, it's mind-boggling. But Marjorie Taylor Greene did an hour-long interview on her podcast, which I'm pretty sure she does from her office at the on House grounds at the Capitol.
Okay.
About this guy saying that, this was an assassination and that it was all, set up, and she was an innocent victim, and she was actually crawling through the window to stop the crowd. She had deputized herself as a cop to stop the people from trying to break through the window. That's why she punched a guy and went through the window first. And this is, coming from Marjorie Taylor Greene, is it that surprising? Is it that, outrageous that she would believe something like that, or even further that? No, not at all. As a matter of fact, the more people believe that those are actually her feet in the doofus bomber footage, the more it makes sense that she would do these gigantic distractions away from culpability and try to reinforce the reasoning behind January 6th, which is also what Trump does. But the fact that he brings it up and that Newsmax hosts bring it up and they just let it sit there, but they don't explain what they mean, why they think she was an innocent victim, what led them to believe it. Because, like I said, in theory, they've all seen the same stuff we've seen. It's because of this storyline. It's because this thing that Marjorie Taylor Greene pushes. And let me tell you that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz it behooves us as Democrats to make them the face of the Republican Party, not only because they are unpopular and insane, but because it's true. That they are the seeds of the movement that's happening within the Republican Party right now. That if you see something percolate to the top and with very few details, all the details are being held by these folks, by MTG and Lauren Boebert and these lunatics. And I'm not here, and nor do I have any interest in defending the Republicans at all. But I want people to recognize that is the bullet train they are on. That's the direction of the Republican Party. There is no middle there. There's some people who are still in office that you can negotiate with in their time in office, Kissinger, Cheney, and the like, who will negotiate in good faith as establishment Republicans with conservative ideas that you may differ on their economic or social policy concepts, but they'll have an honest conversation with you, and they'll come to a consensus about what you and they can get past their constituents, and we can bond. That's democracy. I'm for it. That's not where the Republican Party is going. And the illusion that somehow we can cede ground in any upcoming election to any of these folks is insanity. The irony is that it's going to be Democrats in the state of Wyoming that are going to save Liz Cheney.
Probably.
No question. They're not going to. And again, that goes to the concept. Could there ever be a Democratic, party member elected to the single congressional seat in Wyoming? No. I'm going with no. Not anytime soon. Eventually, sure, absolutely. because but as long as the vilification continues both within and without the Democratic Party, it's not going to happen. But the fact that we find ourselves defending the daughter of Dick Cheney in the state of Wyoming as the steady and sure voice of simple constitutional behavior shows you how far the Republican Party has fallen, and that any footsie with the idea that it's 6 of one, half dozen of another, there's really no difference between Democrats and Republicans. It really puts a lie to that phrase in the most stark way possible. I'm hoping that Philip Bittner can join us during the next hour. That's we shall see what we shall see. He's obviously traveling, and there's a lot going on there. But next hour, we will definitely have some updates about the war in Ukraine and our actions. Biden's trip overseas, both conversing with the G20 nations, the G7 nations, and with NATO. And the EU, huge progress. We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Don't forget, vote.org. Make sure you are registered. Make a plan to vote. We'll be back.